Well, this is a smaller election in the sense that we just have rerun and by-election. So some states ordinarily are always contentious, whether it's a major or by-election for legislative elections. However, voter turnout is still a major challenge. If you look at most of the states that have elections, I was looking at the turnout figures, very few of them had over 30% turnout for the presidential elections. So you could imagine that for that very popular election, because presidential elections are usually very popular, and you have states that had basically less than 30%. I think so far, Kaduna had 30-something% turnout or so. Most of the states are ranging between 30, early 30s and then lower 30s and higher 20s. So what is showing is that turnout is still low. And I'm hoping that for these elections, that voters understand the important role our legislators play. And if our legislators play a vital role in our democracy, and if we do not elect the right people into the state assemblies, into the national assemblies, then we will not achieve the kinds of results we want. So honestly, for voters, whoever is listening, if you have an election happening in your constituency, dust your PVC and go out and vote. Lawmakers have three roles of lawmaking: representation and oversight. Oversight is key. As simple as security issues that we're dealing with. When we have responsive and dedicated lawmakers, the questions that will be happening now is beyond just inviting service chiefs to come and respond to security issues. Is using data around security to ask the questions. Why do we have a lot of challenges despite the funds that go into security? Why don't we have things like tactical units? Well, you need the lawmakers to understand the process, to seek for knowledge, to know why they are there, to ask those questions. So if we don't get the right people into the House of Assemblies and these national assemblies, it also undermines the work that we're hoping to achieve with our democracy. So that's one. Voter turnout, honestly, I know that people have lost faith or people are losing faith. But the thing is, we cannot give up on the country. No one will come and build Nigeria for us. By voting, we make the choice to choose our leaders. And then the other point you asked, I think there was the other point as beyond voter turnout. You asked around apathy.
Voter apathy, voter intimidation. I mean, you basically answered the question.
Yes. I mean, intimidation, honestly, is not. Most times, intimidation is a political tool used to undermine the votes of voters in specific locations. And so, if we want to actually curb intimidation, what we need is arrest. One, if people are arrested and their sponsors or whoever sent them is prosecuted, it will deter those kinds of occurrences. But when people are not arrested, when we reward criminality and crime, it does not create deterrence. It just creates and enables impunity. And so what we need in these elections, because this is beyond voters, it doesn't make sense that people go to vote and are intimidated or violated or even abused. We need our security agencies to be up to the task to ensure that whomever is trying to disrupt the process, intimidate voters, that they are arrested and that they are duly prosecuted and sentenced, because our Electoral Act provides of penalties and punishments for offenders. The other part is for the political class. I will keep calling on politicians, because those who go to intimidate thugs don't go on their own. Someone sent them. And so it's important that the political class also do not, our politicians and candidates, whoever is listening, parties, please think about this country for once. No need sending thugs to go and intimidate people. And I want to link this to our insecurity problem. Most times when thugs are empowered with arms to disrupt the process, post-elections, we don't withdraw, these politicians don't withdraw these arms from them, which is why we have so much proliferation of small arms in the hands of armed men who are not state actors. And we are saying how we have an increase in crime. It's because they were thugs who were given arms, and these thugs now have these arms. The politicians did not capture them into their own government, and so they are using these arms to do as they please. And I think we need to connect a lot to understand the interconnection between our politics, our economy, and our insecurity. And I think if we begin to make these connections, then we can hold those people that ought to owe us a duty of care. We can hold them responsible for their actions.
So before I take you up on some innovation Yaga Africa is making a case for, INEC has continued to leverage on technology for credible conduct of elections in the country. What do you think INEC should do to ensure effective utilization of beavers and other tools on Saturday?
Well, I believe, one, the beavers, from our data from the last elections, beavers functioned properly. For the majority of our polling, over 90% had the beavers functioning optimally. In fact, for locations where the beavers had some issues, they were replaced. And so we had higher percentages of functionality of the beavers. And what I have to share this also because that innovation did work. But we also have instances where some people who were deployed were not those who were trained, and I mentioned it earlier. And so when someone is handling a machine that he or she was not trained to handle, he or she will blame the machine for not functioning rather than blame him or herself for not knowing how to use it. So if one of the things we have seen is that the beavers has enabled that process of limiting multiple voters or multiple voting. So what we just need is for INEC to ensure that every beavers is properly configured to their polling unit and that each official deployed is properly trained to use these beavers to accredit voters. That's one. The second is data safety and security, and even preserving the data on the beavers so that you can always make reliance to the information on that. But remember that the beavers, we believe, works hand in hand with the result portal, because the idea from the guidelines is that the beavers is used to take a picture of the result sheet from EC80 at the polling unit level and upload that on the result portal. And if there's something we want to see the Electoral Commission improve on, is when it comes to this technology, is ensuring that seamless process. And when it comes to results management, that the results are uploaded on the result portal so at the close of polls, once they are done completing the result sheet, that is done at the polling unit level. Because from the portal, they can tell when it's done from different locations. And that the right sheet is uploaded. So those kinds of, because you need to improve on technology. But beyond improving technology, you need to maintain and update consistently. If you don't maintain it properly, and if you don't update its features, I think the question is to constantly ask, how will citizens interact with this platform in such a way that the experience is interacting on the platform and that they are inspired in the process? So that constant question and answer with the people would help INEC improve on the technology. I can't talk much around, I can't emphasize the importance of data security, and because I want to believe INEC is already on top of that. But honestly, technology does not answer the questions, all questions in elections. But if you deploy technology effectively, it can build confidence in the process.
Right. So can you talk to us, before we go tonight, talk to us about the call by Gaga Africa for Electoral Act amendments to enable early voting by essential service providers. What's the motive behind this?
Well, we are in a country where millions of voters do not get to vote on elections, not because they do not want to vote, but because they are working on elections. They are simple as INEC officials, the ad hoc officials. If you think about it, we have over 470-something thousand polling units, and we have an average of 3 to 4 officials deployed to each polling unit. If you multiply 4 by over 170,000, you know what the numbers are. These numbers of individuals do not get to vote because they are working on elections day, and most times they're not in the locations where they registered to vote. We have media practitioners. I'm sure on elections day, probably in the field or in the studio. A lot of media personnel love to vote, but they've never had the opportunity to vote. Not to talk of other INEC officials, observers, even military security personnel. Now, these are a large number of percentage of citizens, millions, who do not get to vote. What we are hoping to achieve with this new electoral process is to introduce early voting. Now, what early voting does, we've seen it happen in countries like Ghana, is that it allows election day workers to vote before election day. Now, there are 2 ways to do this. Because in Liberia, for instance, one of the things we observed when we deployed to observe the elections was that those working on elections day get to vote on elections day in any location where they are working. The only thing is that depending on where you are, you may vote for only the president, because president, the constituency is the nation. But if you're working within your senatorial district, then you can vote for the Senate. It depends on where you are, but at least everyone gets a chance to vote for the president. So there are 2 proposals here. Early voting, or allow elections day workers to vote where they are working, but they can vote for maybe depending on their location. So we have And we've seen it work in countries in Africa. And see, we didn't want to go to the West. We wanted to look at countries within the continent that practice this, where people get to vote. We have in South Africa. We have in Sierra Leone, in fact, last elections, those who were going on for pilgrimage, for the pilgrimage, got the chance to vote before the elections because they wouldn't be around during the elections. So there was that review, a policy that was made to enable them vote before they went on their pilgrimage. And so if you see countries making efforts, I think Nigeria being one, a supposed giant of Africa and one of the leading countries when it comes to the ECOWAS nations, I do believe that it's time we consider early voting because that right to vote is a right for every citizen. And the fact you're working on election day should not be a limitation to your right to vote.
Absolutely. So another innovation Yaga Africa is making a case for is inclusion of photographs and names of candidates on the ballot paper in elections. Why do you think this is necessary and how practicable is this?
Well, this would also, because, currently the system is you vote for a party. But if there's something we've seen is that, one, there is fluidity when it comes to party membership. Politicians, sadly, move from one party to the next. Sometimes in one electoral cycle, politicians have changed from within one circle and become members of 4 different parties. And so the idea is to help voters know who they are voting for. And we think it would also enable some sense of accountability, that the images of the candidates are on the ballot paper. Now, this will require electoral reform, which includes even amendments to some sections in the Constitution. The idea is that voters can easily identify with their candidates if their faces are on the ballot paper. And that is because party logos are a bit confusing to vote, especially for some of the newer parties. For legislative offices, most times you have newer parties or parties with less national prominence contesting there. But the voters don't even understand what the logos are. It also affects how they make their decisions. So 2 things. One, it promotes some level of accountability that whoever you're voting for is who will be winning the elections, but it also enables voters to connect better with their candidates and make the right choices when they go to vote at the polls.
Right, but I also asked, how practicable is this, given how litigation drags on? Sometimes candidates for election are resolved by the courts less than 48 hours to election.
Yeah, which is also a problem. But as part of our recommendations, also we're looking for reviews of timelines for litigation, pre-elections cases. See, it doesn't make sense that to an elections, we still have pre-elections decisions that are taken that could change who the candidates are for an election. It changes the whole conversation around accountability and mutual responsibility when it comes to how we engage. We have situations where when you voted and then another candidate is the candidate that gets the votes. And so part of our recommendation, because it's part of a broader recommendation for reviewing of timelines for elections litigation, which includes both pre-elections matter and post-elections matter. One of the proposals we're hoping we can do, most of this will require constitutional amendments, but it's about calculating the timelines. Can we have pre-elections cases finish way ahead of elections so that we're certain of who the candidates are? And then post-elections, can we have cases concluded before inauguration so that we don't have people taking on, getting into office and then there's a court case and then that individual is out. So it's also important that we look at these things to at least create some sense of sanity in our electoral process.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's been a pleasure speaking with you tonight. Always a pleasure having you on Politics Tonight. We appreciate your time with us. Cynthia Mbamalu is the Director of Programs, Yaga Africa, as we focus on INEC preparedness ahead of Saturday's by-election. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night.